Epistle to Dr. Arbuthnot is a satirical poem written by Alexander Pope in 1734. It is considered one of Pope's most famous and influential works. The poem takes the form of a letter or epistle addressed to his friend, John Arbuthnot, a physician and satirist, and it serves as a defense of Pope's life and work against his critics. Here is a summary of the main themes and ideas in the poem. Personal attacks. Pope begins the poem by addressing the personal attacks and criticism he has faced from various individuals, including fellow poets and critics. He uses satire to mock his detractors and portrays them as envious and spiteful. Literary and artistic ambitions. Throughout the poem, Pope discusses his own literary and artistic ambitions. He defends his right to pursue poetry and satire as a legitimate art form and defends his place in the literary world. The Scribblers Club. Pope was a member of the Scribblers Club, a group of writers and satirists that included Arbuthnot, Jonathan Swift, and John Gay. He pays tribute to the club and its members in the poem, highlighting their shared commitment to satire and literary excellence. Attacking critics. Pope devotes a significant portion of the poem to attacking his specific critics and enemies, often using biting satire and wit to skewer them. He portrays them as hypocrites and fools. Pope's poetic philosophy. Throughout the poem, Pope expounds on his poetic philosophy, emphasizing the importance of wit, good taste, and reason in poetry. He argues that poetry should serve a moral purpose and that it should be a reflection of the author's true self. Personal anecdotes. Pope includes various personal anecdotes and references to his own life and experiences, offering insights into his own character and motivations. Satirical techniques. Epistle to Dr. Arbuthnot employs a range of satirical techniques, including irony, sarcasm, and humor, to make its points and entertain readers. In essence, Epistle to Dr. Arbuthnot is both a defense of Pope's career and a broader statement on the nature of satire, art, and literary criticism. It showcases Pope's wit and mastery of the satirical form while providing insight into the literary and personal conflicts of his time. Here is a more in-depth analysis of Alexander Pope's Epistle to Dr. Arbuthnot. 1. Purpose and context. Epistle to Dr. Arbuthnot is a significant work in Pope's canon and is often seen as a key statement of his poetic philosophy. It was written in response to personal attacks and criticisms that Pope had endured from various literary figures of his time, especially in the wake of his satirical works like the Dunciad. Pope wrote this poem to defend himself, his poetry, and his friends from these attacks, using satire as his primary tool. 2. Satire and wit. Satire is a central theme throughout the poem. Pope uses satire to expose and ridicule the foolishness and hypocrisy of his critics. His wit is sharp, and he employs irony and humor to devastating effect, often turning his detractors' own words against them. 3. Literary ambitions. Pope defends his choice of poetry as a legitimate art form and his right to engage in satire. He argues that satire serves a moral purpose by correcting vice and folly. He acknowledges his own ambition in the literary world and his desire for fame, which he justifies by suggesting that fame is the reward for doing good in the world through his satire. 4. The Scribblers Club. Pope's affiliation with the Scribblers Club is an important aspect of the poem. He pays tribute to the club and its members, emphasizing their shared commitment to satire and their literary endeavors. The club, which included luminaries like Jonathan Swift and John Gay, played a significant role in shaping the literary landscape of the time. 5. Personal anecdotes. Pope includes personal anecdotes and references to his own life experiences, giving readers insight into his character and motivations. These anecdotes serve to humanize Pope and present him as a sympathetic figure facing unjust criticism. 6. Attacks on critics. Pope devotes considerable portions of the poem to attacking his specific critics and enemies. Often uses vivid and humorous language to paint them as envious, petty, and misguided. Notable targets include Colley Cibber and Joseph Addison, both prominent literary figures of the era. 7. Poetic philosophy. Throughout the poem, Pope expounds on his poetic philosophy, emphasizing the importance of wit, good taste, and reason in poetry. He argues that poets should be guided by a sense of moral purpose and should write in a way that reflects their true selves. 8. Stylistic elements. Pope's use of heroic couplets, a rhymed pair of lines in iambic pentameter, is a hallmark of his poetic style. He employs this form with skill throughout the poem. The poem's structure is that of an epistle or letter, which allows Pope to directly address his friend, Arbuthnot, and his audience. 9. Legacy. Epistle to Dr. Arbuthnot is considered a masterpiece of satirical poetry and has had a lasting impact on English literature. It is often studied for its exploration of the role of the poet in society, the power of satire, and the complexities of literary fame. In summary, Epistle to Dr. Arbuthnot is a multifaceted poem that serves as both a personal defense and a broader statement on the art of satire and poetry. It showcases Pope's exceptional skill in wielding satire as a weapon against his critics while presenting his own views on poetry, morality, and literary ambition. Let's examine Epistle to Dr. Arbuthnot by Alexander Pope more closely in terms of its structure, style, themes, and key literary devices. Structure and style. Epistolary form. The poem is written in the form of an epistle or letter, directly addressing Arbuthnot. This form allows Pope to personalize his message and create a conversational tone. Heroic couplets. Pope employs heroic couplets throughout the poem. This structured rhyme scheme, rhymed pairs of lines in iambic pentameter, provides a sense of order and balance to his satire. Narrative progression. The poem follows a loose narrative structure. Pope begins by discussing his own personal experiences and critics, then transitions to his own poetic philosophy and literary ambitions, and finally ends with a return to addressing specific critics. Themes. Satire. The most prominent theme of the poem is satire. Pope uses satire to expose and criticize the flaws, hypocrisy, and absurdity of his contemporary literary and social circles. Poetic ambition. Pope reflects on his own ambitions as a poet. He acknowledges his desire for fame and the importance of his role as a satirist in addressing the follies of society. Literary criticism. The poem contains a self-reflexive element where Pope discusses the nature of literary criticism, both as a critic himself and as a subject of criticism. Friendship. The poem is addressed to Dr. Arbuthnot, indicating a strong sense of friendship and camaraderie between the two. Pope uses this friendship as a basis for addressing his critics and personal struggles. Literary devices. Irony. Pope employs irony throughout the poem, often using it to highlight the hypocrisy of his critics. For example, he mocks the very critics who attack him for his satire by satirizing them in return. Parody. Pope parodies various literary styles and individuals, such as his playful imitation of the hackneyed writing style of critics like Joseph Addison. Allusion. The poem is rich in allusions to classical literature and figures, including references to Horace and Virgil, highlighting Pope's erudition and the classical tradition of satire. Personification. Pope personifies various abstract concepts, such as envy and spleen, to create vivid and memorable characters in his satirical narrative. Rhetorical devices. Pope employs a variety of rhetorical devices, including rhetorical questions, parallelism, and antithesis, to enhance the impact of his arguments and satire. Key passages. First in these fields I try the sylvan strains, nor blush to sport on Windsor's blissful plains. In these lines, Pope begins by acknowledging his early poetic efforts and his willingness to engage in pastoral poetry, setting the tone for his defense of his artistic choices. Let Budgell charge low Grub Street on my quill, and write whate'er he pleased, except my will. Pope dismisses his critic Eustace Budgell, asserting his control over his own work and his intention to continue writing according to his own will. Yes, I am proud, I must be proud to see men not afraid of God afraid of me. This passage encapsulates Pope's complex relationship with fame. He takes pride in his ability to hold a mirror to society's flaws and expose them through satire. Who breaks a butterfly upon a wheel? This famous line expresses Pope's view that his critics are using excessive force to attack him. He likens himself to a delicate butterfly and his critics to an overpowered wheel. Overall impression. Epistle to Dr. Arbuthnot is a brilliant example of Pope's mastery of satire and poetic form. Through a clever blend of personal reflection, biting wit, and pointed critique, Pope defends his work and his role as a satirist while providing a compelling commentary on the literary and social landscape of his time. The poem remains a classic in English literature for its insightful exploration of art, fame, and the power of satire. In Epistle to Dr. Arbuthnot, by Alexander Pope, the character sketch primarily revolves around two central figures. 1. Alexander Pope, the speaker. Personality. Pope portrays himself as a witty, self-aware, and introspective individual. He is unapologetically ambitious and proud of his literary achievements. He is not afraid to confront his critics and defend his work. Ambitions. Pope's character in the poem is driven by a desire for fame and recognition as a poet and satirist. He believes in the moral purpose of satire and sees himself as a guardian of literary standards and virtue. Resilience. Pope's character displays resilience and determination in the face of criticism and personal attacks. He uses satire as a weapon to counter his adversaries. 2. Dr. Arbuthnot. Personality. Drive. Arbuthnot is portrayed as a trusted friend and confidant of Pope. He is a respected physician and a fellow member of the Scribblers' Club, which suggests a shared intellectual and creative bond. Loyalty. Arbuthnot's character is characterized by his loyalty to Pope. He serves as both the recipient of the epistle and a symbol of steadfast friendship and support in Pope's life. Symbolism. In addition to his personal attributes, drive, Arbuthnot also serves as a symbol of the intellectual and artistic circle that Pope associates with. Through him, Pope indirectly praises the values and camaraderie of the Scribblers' Club. While these two characters are central to the poem, Epistle to Dr. Arbuthnot also features a cast of satirical characters and literary figures from Pope's time. These characters are depicted with varying degrees of mockery, depending on their roles as critics or rivals in Pope's life. Each character is presented in a way that serves Pope's satirical purpose, highlighting their flaws and vices. Overall, the character sketch in the poem primarily focuses on Alexander Pope as the protagonist and defender of his own literary and satirical pursuits, while drive, Arbuthnot represents a trusted friend and ally in his life and creative endeavors. Epistle to Dr. Arbuthnot, by Alexander Pope, is a remarkable work that combines personal reflection, biting satire, and a deep exploration of the poet's artistic philosophy. Here's a commentary on key aspects of the poem. 1. Satire as a defense. The poem serves as Pope's defense against his critics, both in a personal and a literary sense. He employs satire to turn the tables on those who attacked him, using wit and irony to expose their own flaws and hypocrisies. Through satire, Pope presents himself as a fearless critic of society's shortcomings, arguing that his satirical works have a moral purpose in ridiculing vice and folly. 2. Artistic ambition. Pope openly acknowledges his ambition for fame and recognition as a poet and satirist. He argues that ambition is not inherently negative but can be a driving force for achieving greatness. He sees himself as part of a literary tradition and strives to uphold the standards of classical poetry. 3. The role of friendship. Dr. Arbuthnot's presence in the poem represents the importance of friendship and support in Pope's life. He symbolizes the unwavering companionship and understanding that every artist needs to navigate the challenges and criticisms of the world. The poem underscores the value of such friendships in sustaining and motivating creative endeavors. 4. Literary and historical allusions. Pope's use of allusions to classical literature and figures, as well as references to contemporary literary personalities like Joseph Addison and Eustace Budgell, adds depth to the poem. These allusions demonstrate Pope's erudition and position him within a literary tradition while allowing him to criticize the shortcomings of his contemporaries. 5. Complexity of fame. Pope grapples with the complexities of fame. While he desires recognition, he also recognizes the pitfalls and drawbacks of being in the public eye. This is evident in his lament that people who should fear God instead fear him. 6. Self-reflection. The poem provides insight into Pope's character, motivations, and personal struggles. He presents himself as a complex figure, simultaneously proud and vulnerable, confident and besieged by criticism. Pope's willingness to examine his own role and motivations as a satirist adds depth to his character. 7. Mastery of form. Pope's use of heroic couplets, a highly structured and rhythmic form, demonstrates his mastery of poetic technique. The precise rhyme and meter allow him to deliver his satirical messages with clarity and impact. 8. Legacy. Epistle to Dr. Arbuthnot has left a lasting legacy in the world of English literature. It is celebrated for its exploration of the relationship between the poet and society, the power of satire, and the complexities of literary fame. The poem continues to be studied and appreciated for its wit, intelligence, and the enduring relevance of its themes. In conclusion, Epistle to Dr. Arbuthnot is a brilliant example of Alexander Pope's skill in blending personal reflection and satire to address his critics and articulate his views on poetry and ambition. It remains a powerful and enduring work that invites readers to contemplate the role of the artist in society and the challenges of pursuing artistic ambition. Epistle to Dr. Arbuthnot, by Alexander Pope possesses several notable features and characteristics that contribute to its significance and impact as a satirical poem. Satire. The poem is a prime example of satirical literature.